Hello again. This time I'd like to start by doing something I don't do nearly enough, and that's my bad and on me. I don't say thank you nearly as much as I should, but I do want to let you know that I do appreciate each and every one of you who gives me the opportunity to have my voice and my opinions heard. Not to excuse myself, but to explain myself and my situation. I'm usually at a loss for time, especially after a long day of homeschool, and barely have enough time to record and post before having to bounce to the next matriarchal obligations that are awaiting my attention. But still, the excuse, or rather my excuse, is not necessarily a good one. Your time, like mine, is precious. So today, I'd like to send out my sincerest thanks for you taking the time to watch and listen to me, to listen, to like, to give a thumbs up, and hopefully to share. I truly wanted to keep this one short and sweet. At least those were my intentions, my very good intentions. But you know what they say about good intentions. Like so many other things, one point is so often intertwined with others. And that's exactly what has happened in this case. I don't often, and perhaps I will regret it, maybe in just a few minutes or after a few hours from now. But I think at least partially there is some validity to my next point or set of points, even if I don't necessarily agree with myself. So essentially, here goes nothing, as they say. Now, I don't often agree with politicians or those in power. I generally feel they are out for themselves and not for the people they are supposed to be out for. There are days when you can hear me chanting, "Power to the people! Power to the people!" And then I look around. It is on these days, and as of late, there seem to be more and more and more of them, that I am almost, remember I said almost, that I am almost on board with the current and seemingly popular socialist sentimentality and paradigm and agenda. One that I personally lived and experienced up in Canada, and in many instances did not like, not one iota. A way of life that seems to stifle and stamp on vital competition, business, the vast selection of goods and services many of us in the States expect and are used to, with many wonderful people up north living paycheck to paycheck and hand to mouth. Though that currently seems true in the U.S. too, so I can't say much. It's a government that, because of its overwhelming outreach, input, and control, has even managed to seemingly squelch a sense of patriotism and national pride. However, and though, a big shout out to the truckers and all those who supported them and their cause. But, and I can't believe that I'm saying this, but taking power out of the hands of the masses, again, like I've said before, often the M is silent, and putting it in the hands of the powers that be, in many instances may just prove to be beneficial. How so? Well, I would ask, has anyone looked around lately? I mean, really, truly opened their eyes wide enough and taken a good look around? Have they? Have you? Most people, not only in America, but around the globe, although I haven't personally been to Europe in decades to be completely forthcoming, but most people, including many well-educated folks, so-called elites, as Hillary Clinton termed them, are or fall into a category that she termed a basket of deplorables. And it extends well beyond her intended insult directed at Trump supporters. In reality, in all honesty, the term spans across the population at large. Wealthy, not so wealthy, poor, and the list goes on. At least in the Great White North, with Pretty Boy Floyd, I meant Trudeau, and the government in charge, they're able to, at minimum, cover their tracks and the devastation, destruction, and increasingly deplorable conditions, as well as the plight of the people living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, by painting a pretty picture exteriorly via exquisite Eurocentric and Euro-inspired architecture, infrastructure, and homes, as well as beautiful, unscathed natural landscape and affordable taxes. Though, as I've said before, their medical leaves a lot to be improved upon and even more to be desired. And personally, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It has been common knowledge, at least in the past, that the United States and its people were referred to as ugly Americans. It was often asserted that this reputation and nickname was bestowed upon us because of our distasteful and unfavorable arrogance and attitude. Yet perhaps, and I thought about this, perhaps it has a much deeper and more deeply rooted meaning. Perhaps, just perhaps, we have given others authority to label us ugly Americans, not only because of our personality or loud, boisterous behavior, maybe because of our overall ugliness, our deteriorating and decaying buildings, our horrible architecture and infrastructure, homes that, as I've noted previously, are nothing more than glamorized mobile homes at a high price, especially in states like California and New York. Most of our bridges, except perhaps for possibly a few and only as of recently, were outdated and outmoded and truly lacked any architectural beauty and or appeal. In fact, our nation, as beautiful as it may have once been, or had and may still have the potential to be, has been completely annihilated by our avarice and our apathy. Besides destroying our neighborhoods, our communities, and our cities, we have also destroyed much of our natural landscape and the beauty it offered our people. We have replaced vast green spaces with tacky, tawdry, and unnecessary skyscrapers. Skyscrapers that also lack any architectural dignity. Ugly apartment buildings, unsightly office structures, disgraceful, deplorable school buildings. And the list goes on and on and on ad nauseum. And then the powers that be have the audacity to preach to us about Green New Deals and the environment and the like. Oh, please. We, especially in the states like New York, don't even have the decency to, like Canada, cover up our mess, or dare I say, even sweep it under the rug by at least investing in things like beautification programs, such as perhaps limiting, yeah, I said it, limiting building, planting trees, flowers, or both, etc., along our highways and along our roadways. Perhaps even replacing our unsightly barrier walls. You know, the ones that grace our highways, replacing them with more artistically inspired structures, rather than the banal, uninspired structures already in existence, the eyesores we are forced to stare at during our daily commutes. Tucker Carlson once mentioned that mom and pop stores are quickly being replaced by dollar stores on every corner. And he's right. But as a child who grew up with Woolworths and Woolco as a staple shopping emporium, I personally don't have a problem with dollar stores per se. In fact, if you've ever seen the dollar stores down south, such as Dollar Generals, in fact, and the dollar stores up north, Dollaramas to be specific, they offer a much greater and much wider variety than the Dollar Trees we are used to in most places in the U.S. The stores are in much better condition than the stores you would find even in affluent areas across American suburbia. Their shelves are fully or close to fully stocked, with a much greater array and assortment than anyone could ever expect to find at a Dollar Tree anywhere in the US. Even in Canada, the Dollar Trees are abysmal, and the majority of those stores are, for the most part, pristinely kept. The items are not or barely scattered across the floor, tattered and torn, nor are these eclectic yet affordable items as cheap, tacky, and tawdry as those found here in the United States, especially at Dollar Trees. Well, of course, for the exception, at least in my experience, Dollar Generals and Pop Shelves in the South, which have an amazing selection. Pop Shelf in particular. Tucker Carlson also stated at one point that cleanliness is close to godliness, which again brings me back to my original point. Why I often ruminate about the feasibility and possible potential benefits of a somewhat, though not entirely, social paradigm and the government taking charge. Did I really just say that? I shocked even me. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't trust, not even in the slightest, the elites, which happen to constitute the overwhelming abundance of the powers that be. In fact, as I said, the erudite elites are the ones actually pulling all the strings, but that's a whole other story for perhaps a whole other day. Yet, despite their obvious and now in-your-face depravity, these elites and their cronies at least have the decency to put on the affectation of caring and of a life well lived, and a life many of we the people aspire to. They put on an air of sophistication, class, and all things elegant and beautiful, if you will, while we the people have redefined said terms and excuse things like an unkempt home or a shoddy garden as a life well lived. We claim that our apathy toward keeping up appearances is a sign that we are simply too busy, having too many obligations and too much fun to take care of ourselves, our homes, our properties, etc. Let's go back to Canada for a minute. Canada's liquor stores, run by the government, known as LCBO stores, or the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, can boast, honestly, some of the most beautiful, well-organized liquor stores, north of the border, with a vast and decadent selection of wines and liquors. Some even have beer in the back room, though most beers up north are reserved for the beer store. And yes, that's what it's called, the beer store. But both are beautifully organized. Either way, their windows are not showcased by posters and or empty boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. But like the dollar stores up north and down south, as I've mentioned, they are all well kept and well organized. Let's face it, because the government has to keep up appearances. America's current ugliness is pervasive across the board, across all states, though some states are better than others, across all peoples, across all nationalities, and the list goes on, and it affects all of us. But does it? I think that most people don't even notice how dire the situation really is. Many, if not most people, in my opinion, I'll say it, are pigs, slobs, and cavalier about everything and anything, which is probably why in Europe and in Canada, the government has gotten wind of this and thus has gotten their grimy hands all over everything, because the masses, as I've noted over and over before, the M is usually silent, do not even notice or care, at least not too much, about living in filth, destitution, decay, and squalor. The less they have to do, the less responsibility they have, the better for them. Has anyone noticed how most people live? Most people don't take the time to vacuum their homes, at least not appropriately and or often enough. They rarely make their beds, and when they do, don't get me started. They simply throw it together, would never pass a military test. Most people are comfortable with doing laundry once or twice a week, and that includes people with families. Throwing in their delicate items, what used to be called or termed unmentionables back in the day, throwing their unmentionables in with their darks, their whites, their towels, even their shoes and bathroom carpets, all in one wash. It doesn't matter to most that their white socks are now black and or gray and tarnished, as long as they can appease their mind and say they actually threw them in a washer and made the attempt to wash and or clean them. Most people are uninspired to do the work it takes to beautify and clean their homes, at least on a regular basis, because their vantage point is that visitors, friends and family, are there to see them, not their home. And if those that come to visit like and or love them, they will accept them the way they are. And that includes their affinity for living in filth and chaos. And most people do live in chaos. They're not accustomed to putting things away on a put it away as you use it basis. They pile it up and wait for the sky to fall, Chicken Little. Most people want to take the easy way out. How else do you explain the overwhelming abundance of pre-made foods these days? The overwhelming indulgence of fast foods that is making us as a people and as a nation heavier and unhealthier than ever before. How do you otherwise explain prepackaged salads? Salads that are yellowing and browning in the bag, that may even potentially be infected with E. coli, that many are still willing to eat. Better yet, serve to their friends and families. Gross. How else could you justify pre-peeled tangerines? Honestly, people, how much effort does it take to peel your own blessed tangerine? And it's no secret that most people don't cook or don't care to cook from scratch anymore. Most people want to open cans or have others do their so-called dirty work, doing their dirty work for them, noting that it's too much stress and too much effort to actually take the time necessary to do right by themselves and their families. They profess that all these responsibilities cause them a tremendous amount of stress, a stress they just can't handle. Sends their mind into a tailspin. A stress they can't face head on, as did previous generations. And that leads to the proliferating need for coping medications. Coping medications that are overtaking and destroying our nation and our nations, and therefore propagating drug use and abuse, a problem especially in terms of fentanyl and other life-threatening narcotics, which ultimately brings us all the way back to why people now on drugs have lost interest in life and living it well, and why we the people have become cavalier, complacent, slovenly pigs who don't care or don't care to notice the catastrophe consuming us. If we as people and as nations, but I'm targeting the United States of America specifically in this instance, if we are not noticing, or if we are simply turning a blind eye to the aforementioned, then it's no wonder, it's absolutely no wonder at all that our nation is on a fast and furious track to a constant and perpetual decline. A decline we are comfortable with because our way of life has also declined over the years, over the decades, and over the centuries. A decline that has happened because we've abdicated good judgment, abdicated aspiring for the best, and replaced it with aspiring for what is easiest. And instead of living with pride, panache, and dignity, living instead with what is seen as not only shabby chic rather, but sloppy chic. Or should I better say slovenly chic. As we continue to morph into a nation of androgynous, pot-smoking, and then some couch potatoes without direction and without a purpose. It is for all these reasons above that I sometimes, more and more often find myself inclined to agree with the egregious who want to take over our rights and take over our privileges. I sometimes find myself inclined to agree that a socialist plan may just work for our society. Remember, from children to the aged, people who cannot properly and appropriately take care of themselves are often, in fact, taken care of by others. And we, the people, are no different. We, in my opinion, we, the people, are failing miserably in so many arenas. We are failing miserably to prove ourselves and to prove our capabilities, allowing our actions to speak louder than our words. And what our actions are saying, in fact, screaming, is that we struggle with being adults. We struggle with being responsible. We struggle with being the responsible adults in the room and don't know how to and don't care to act accordingly for our own good, the good of our nation and the good of future generations. In essence, via our actions or via our inactions, what we the people are telling those in control who seek to control us, is that we are in fact entitled children, incapable of thinking appropriately for ourselves and for reaching for our best potential, and are therefore in need of parental, and in this case, governmental supervision, guidance, and control. We the people are giving up and handing over our own rights. We have no one to blame but each other and ourselves.